The first sign came not from a dramatic sky flash or a sudden tremor in space, but from a quiet blip on a computer screen no wider than a pond dot at 3:42 a.m. UTC. A data stream from the Atlas Survey telescope in Hawaii lit up with something unusual. Nothing dramatic, just coordinates, values outside the typical range. A fast-moving speck, barely brighter than background noise yet moving too quickly, and along a path that defied everything we understand about orbital mechanics. At first glance, it was easy to miss. A tiny point of light, not out of place, but when cross-tracked with 3 other telescopes, one in the Canary Islands, another in South Africa, and the last orbiting Earth aboard the Gaia Observatory, all confirmed the same trajectory. An alert was issued. New object, potentially interstellar. Its preliminary designation was clinical 3I Atlas. The 3I stood for its nature only the third known confirmed interstellar object passing through our solar system. A rare visitor from beyond. The second, Comet Borisov, came and went in 2019. The first, Oumuamua, was discovered in 2017 and left behind more questions than answers. But this was different. Comets usually followed long elliptical paths. They buzzed the sun, released vapor and light, then slipped back into the shadows of the outer system. They didn't come inbound at this speed, and they didn't curve in such violent sweeping arcs. Observatories scrambled to watch the object. Over the course of just 48 hours, something became clear. 3I Atlas wasn't just passing through. It was aiming. The trajectory was not a casual drift through the solar system like Borisov. It was targeted, controlled, hyperbolic. The math didn't lie. This thing was not bound by the sun's gravity. It would enter, curve tightly around the inner system, and leave. But what sent chills down every astronomer's spine was this. The object's approach vector traced back to nowhere. No identifiable star. No matching celestial pathway. It had come from deep intergalactic space, the kind of emptiness where time itself seemed to sit still, between ancient galaxies beyond clouds of dark matter, far beyond even the Milky Way's outer shell. And then came the second anomaly, the brightness. Normally, icy comets glow as sunlight turns their frozen surfaces to gas, forming tails made of dust and particles. But 3I Atlas showed no coma, no tail. It wasn't getting brighter with proximity to the sun. It was stable, holding a consistent albedo despite heat, reflectivity measured at 98%, a near-perfect mirror. The only known naturally reflective material on that level would be synthetic. Theories spiraled fast. Perhaps it was a primordial black comet, or a piece of a shattered planet coated in something rare. Perhaps, some scientists whispered, it wasn't made of rock at all. Researchers across observatories analyzed time slices of the object's movement, using high-speed photometry and spectroscopy. Astronomers tried to determine the material composition. The light bouncing off it was oddly clean, pure wavelengths without natural spectral absorption lines. In simple terms, it wasn't scattering light like dust or ice. It was bouncing photons like metal, smooth, cold, sterile. Theories got stranger. Some suggested a frozen Dyson swarm fragment. Others proposed dormant probes from distant civilizations, drifting alone between galaxies. But the object wasn't talking. Not at first. 3 days into observation, the team at the Very Large Telescope in Chile noted something deeply peculiar. Buried in the narrowband spectrum, a pulse, faint, rhythmic, and recurring every 97 minutes, a tiny shift in light frequency that should not occur naturally, especially not with such regularity. They rechecked for interference. There was none. The signal was embedded directly in the light coming from the object itself. It was like a heartbeat, and whether it was artificial or some long-lost trick of nature was immaterial. The rhythm was intentional, and the data suggested something even stranger. It was repeating in base 3 prime intervals. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Not random, not noise. That night, in a dimly lit lab at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the scientists stared at the audio rendering of the light pattern. One of them leaned closer to the screen, headphones on, listening to a synthetic pulse repeating through the low speakers. Tick, tick, tick. Pause, tick, tick. It almost sounds like. It's waiting for something, she whispered. Still, the public didn't know. The discovery was not yet disclosed beyond closed science networks. Only a few insiders monitoring automated alert systems noticed that something had changed on the Atlas network. But the object was approaching fast, and in 6 weeks it would be. Closer to Earth than Mars, global space agencies had to act quickly. The ESA confirmed that a probe, Enceladus Pathfinder 4, could be retasked to intercept a close trajectory path and possibly make contact within 21 days. It wasn't fast, but it was fast enough. The mission was redirected. Live telemetry began transmitting to a central node in Geneva, Switzerland, across the globe in basements, observatories, studios. Someone always had one eye on the sky, but no one yet understood what was coming. Back at the Mauna Loa Observatory, an intern named Leela Benassi ran a model simulation and paused when her 3D render showed something unsettling. By projecting the object's past trajectory backward through time using galactic models, she tracked its path beyond the solar system, beyond the Oort cloud, beyond even the local group. Her screen flashed a model where the projected path passed within 0.03 parsecs of a known black dwarf and invisible, ancient, darkened remnant of a star gone long cold, estimated to be nearly 800 million years old. And yet, the trajectory coming from that region was straight. No gravitational aberration, no natural orbital curving, no interaction with other bodies. The object's path was an almost perfect line dot, as if it had set course, *1 line in her analysis packet, written accidentally in the comments box of her code, summed it up in just 5 words. This wasn't just passing through. The final frame of her simulation glowed softly in the room's darkness. The comet had a direction. Its heartbeat continued. And for the first time, Earth had reason to wonder, were we being visited? Or were we being summoned? The age came not from guesswork, but from elements hidden in the signal itself, an embedded spectral decay signature, hinting at isotopes long thought extinct in open space. Using advanced spectral dating tools, researchers at CERN and MIT began cross-referencing the decay patterns against known half-lives of trace radioactive elements like plutonium-244 and curium-247. These don't exist for long, not under the crushing exposure of deep space, not without breaking down entirely over cosmic time. And yet, they were there, trapped faint in the light echoes bouncing off the comet's skin. Preliminary analysis suggested an age 760 million years. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an old object. This was older than our species, older than the dinosaurs, older even than multicellular life as we know it. 760 million years ago, Earth was locked in a global ice age. Our planet wore a shell of permafrost from pole to pole. Entire continents were buried under glaciers. There were no trees, no fish, no footprints, merely algae in shallow seas, our ancient foundation. Yet out there, in the frozen vacuum between galaxies, this object was already moving, already launched from somewhere unimaginable, already on its journey across time. A comet? Perhaps. But the age hinted at something more than natural drift. No known object could survive unscorched for such a long time across interstellar friction, solar radiation and gravitational tearing. Not without eroding away, not unless it was protected, built. The comet's trajectory, when modeled far enough into the past, passed not just through interstellar space but through desolate zones, scarred voids where no stars have glowed for eons, the kind of places that astrophysicists called the Black Gardens, regions so ancient and empty. They've likely never been touched by life. So how did 3i Atlas move through all of them unscathed? Astrodynamicists began theorizing, not without skepticism but with urgency. The object showed no variation in course, no spin, and no precession drift. It had kept a perfect heading for what might have been nearly a billion years. That shouldn't be possible. Nothing moves in a straight line through space unless guided. Corrected, and even then, barely an object that old, travelling for that long, should have been pulled apart by countless micro-collisions. Random atomic particles, rogue gas clouds, gravitational waves. Even a tiny pebble at relativistic speeds would have obliterated it, and yet it endured. It was as if the entire universe had stepped aside to let it pass. News of the object sage leaked quietly into the science community, and immediately the silence broke, not with answers but with speculation. Institutes from Japan to Germany began publishing papers overnight. Is 3i Atlas an alien probe? Was it a drifting vault of knowledge? Could it be a seeder, delivering the raw ingredients of life across the void? Panspermia, the theory that life didn't originate on Earth, but was brought here suddenly, leapt from fringe to front page. After all, comets have long been thought of as carriers, frozen capsules of carbon, water, and impact energy, the building blocks of life. But none had ever shown signs of design. None had been anything more than dirty snowballs. This, whatever this was, didn't behave like a comet. The reflective shell, the internal pulsing, the deliberate path through timeless emptiness. Many researchers returned to the collected data from years prior, examining the only other known interstellar visitors we had recorded, Oumuamua and Borisov. Suddenly, both seemed more mysterious in hindsight. Perhaps they'd been overlooked, misread too quickly. Had we missed something back then? Were they simply earlier messengers? Parts of a fleet stretched across epochs, staggered over millennia. 3i Atlas opened not just questions, but a haunting possibility. This object might not be the first, only the first we will already see. At NASA Ames, a theoretical physicist named Dr. Cameron Osei had quietly proposed something astonishing. If this object really was 760 million years old and had travelled across vast distances of dead space, it needed not propulsion but inertia, a stable, corrected form of constant motion. He compared it not to a spacecraft, but to a gyroscope frozen in time, self-balancing, using gravitational tethers and micro-adjustments invisible to human eyes. But more alarming was where he believed it had come from. Cameron laid out a theory that staggered even the most open-minded colleagues. The object originated from a region outside the Virgo supercluster, he said, not just outside the Milky Way, but beyond our local galactic neighborhood altogether. Galaxies we only see as points of light. To get here, it would have had to pass through dark space for tens of millions of light years, through cosmological shear zones, around wandering star clusters, across voids that dwarf anything humans can currently measure. And in all that time, through all that distance, it had never wavered. It had never deviated. That meant intent. And where there's intent, there is sender. The temperature on the object's surface, as estimated by radiometric data, held steady at minus 263 degrees Celsius, to degrees above absolute zero, deathly cold. No energy radiating, no decay, only pulse. The object wasn't transmitting in radio, X-ray, or gamma. It was using something older, far older. It communicated not through frequency but timing. Delay patterns, light absorption intervals, spectrotemporal pulses like a metronome for the blind. Perhaps, some thought, it wasn't transmitting to us. Perhaps it was waiting to hear back. Not from Earth, but from something still out there. Other researchers suggested a more unsettling idea, that perhaps the object wasn't awake, that it had been dormant for hundreds of millions of years, and Earth's sun, a cozy G-type star, was merely one of trillions it had passed over. But now it was close enough to wake. Whatever its purpose, whatever its origin, one fact sat quietly in every meeting, every lab, every paused video feed: the object was real, and it was older than our species, our planet, and possibly even our corner of the galaxy. It had seen the birth of stars. And now it was seeing us. There was no sound in space, not in the way we know sound. There was no air to carry vibration, no wind for whispers, and yet, somewhere between the stars and the Earth, something had begun to murmur. Subtle at first, just a slight, repeated dip in luminosity. Microscopic changes barely detectable, like a dancer moving one muscle at a time. But when scientists began charting those dips, mapping every change in frequency, brightness and modulation, a pattern emerged. Not chaos, not background noise, but a deliberate, mathematical rhythm. It started with primes. 3 pulses, then 5, then 7, 11, 13, a pause, then it would start again. Identical, impossibly precise. For most celestial bodies, natural rotation caused changes in brightness, and binary systems caused eclipses that repeated over long cycles, years or decades. But 3i, Atlas showed variation of a different nature. Its signal wasn't just repeating, it was reacting. The modulation intervals began to shorten slightly when a NASA probe adjusted its angle to capture more detailed data. That probe shouldn't have been seen by the Comet. It was too far to create any real interaction, and yet, within an hour of the maneuver, the pattern shifted once more. To the minds of those observing, a new idea took shape. Slow and unsettling. It was aware. On Earth, a joint team from NASA, ESA, and Japan's JAXA began formal signal decryption efforts. For days the data scientists worked in total silence, tape around the lab windows. No access to the outside world. Secrecy wasn't just protocol anymore, it was security. The world was not yet ready for what they might find. They ran the pulses through every known spectrogram, then tried audio conversion, then binary, still nothing. Then to break through, a young woman named Dr. Hannah Liu, working at the University of British Columbia under a SETI exchange grant, tried something odd. Instead of looking for meaning in the data itself, she examined the delays between the pulses, time gaps, not messages in sound, but in silence. When charted out on a time grid, the delay intervals began forming a structure, not random, not digital code, but something eerily familiar to her. She turned her thoughts toward biology, specifically genetics. On a whim, she transcribed the intervals using codon markers A, T, C, G, matching bases based on spacing and symmetry. The results, when compared against the human genome, shocked her. There were partial matches, fragments of sequences that, while incomplete, mirrored known gene structures in mitochondria and chloroplasts. The ancient genes, the universal ones. It wasn't just math anymore. Something in that signal knew DNA, knew life. When she cross-referenced the data with other life forms, cyanobacteria, moss, even certain kinds of deep-sea archaea, the matches deepened. Not complete blueprints, but overlaps. It was communicating in structure, expressing familiarity with the biocode that unites all earthbound life. And yet, it was not a perfect match. Some fragments were off, deliberately so. Not mutations, but enhancements, alterations that implied a version of biology not native to Earth, or at least not native anymore. A second team analyzed the timing of these repeating loops every day. The message grew a little clearer, more refined, like a voice learning how to pronounce a foreign language. Some began to see logic gates hidden in the sequencing, Boolean phrases, nested language loops. Eventually, the computer systems assigned to decrypt the patterns started doing something unexpected. They began correcting themselves. Artificial intelligence, programs designed only to interpret, began evolving their approach to the data. One even rewrote its own semantic passing code to analyze in rotational numeric fields something it had not been programmed to do. That change wasn't traced to any human. The signal had taught it. By the second week of the decoding process, one strange symbol had emerged repeatedly in the converted data, like a stamping watermark burned into the signal's rhythm. 3 vertical dots, then a curved line beneath them, neither language nor glyph, nor recognized alpha pattern. And yet, for those who stared at it too long, the image invoked something deeply human, like a face, almost smiling, distorted by distance. Could it have been coincidence? Could pulses and shadows simply form into pareidolia, the brain's hunger to find signs in the dark? Or was it left there intentionally, not to instruct, not to warn, but to resemble Dot at a security briefing? In Geneva, one scientist said it aloud, quietly, without humor, "It's trying to look like us." No one answered Dot at the Deep Space Listening Post in Canberra, Australia, a remote dish usually used to monitor deep space telemetry from planetary missions. A strange side phenomenon had begun bubbling in the data logs. Low background noise, part of the same Comet signal, was now creating interference patterns with routine satellite work. The signal wasn't loud, but when the staff fed it through sleep-wave modulation to rule out drift, something curious happened. The operators playing the transmission through low-vibration atmospheric modeling machines reported dreams. Strange ones. They'd fall asleep at their desks, some even intentionally, while the signal ran through their headphones or ambient filters in the room, and people across time zones in Arizona, Melbourne, Tokyo began reporting nearly identical imagery. During rest, dark ice, twin stars, lightning underwater, and the hum of something burrowed deep beneath the skin of a planet. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others weren't so sure. Experts in neuroscience reviewed data from sleeping monitors during playback. There, in the low delta wave patterns, they detected faint harmonics resonating at a frequency only active during the deepest stages of unconscious thought. The signal had learned to connect, not to machines, but to minds across the world. Independent observers had started tuning in. Amateur ham radio operators, pirate signal catchers, spiritualist groups. The internet began stirring with what they called the starbeat theory, a new form of universal communication, seeded not with symbols and language, but with resonance. One post simply read, "What if we're not supposed to read the message? What if we're supposed to feel it?" It was mocked at first, but deep down in labs and echo chambers, scientists who'd spent sleepless nights with the pulse echoing through their ears stared longer into the data, and they started to feel it. To .3i/Atlas hadn't announced itself with a voice or signal. It trusted time, trusted us to listen long enough, and somewhere in those slow, ancient pulses, the whisper became a message. "We see you." The lab was silent except for the low hum of the servers. Lights flashed softly along the racks, amber, green, blue, blinking in rhythm with the processing cores analyzing the vast ocean of data still pouring in from 3i ATLAS. What began as a deep space anomaly had become something else entirely, something far closer, something disturbingly familiar. At the European Bioinformatics Institute in Cambridge, a team of geneticists, astrophysicists, and cross-disciplinary AI researchers were staring at the same screen. No one spoke. Rows of code glowed quietly across glass panels, interpreted, visualized, layered in genome sequencing tools. It was unmistakably DNA. Or at least half of it. The pattern extracted from the signal wasn't perfect. It wasn't a functioning genome, but it was recognizable the way a face can be seen in fog. Among the thousands of reconstructed base pairs pulled from weeks of light data analysis, approximately 27% matched sequences found in primordial Earth life. Sequences every human being, every living thing on the planet still carries in their cells. Homobox genes, mitochondrial regulators, even unique snippets from bacteria locked in thermal vents deep beneath the ocean creatures. Untouched by sunlight for billions of years. The signal didn't just resemble life. It knew life. In Geneva, Dr. Hannah Liu submitted her latest paper, quietly, under encrypted transmission to the World Astrobiology Alliance. Its subject line read only, "The mirror in the genome." Her proposal wasn't made lightly. She knew what it meant, what the consequences would be. And still, with shaking fingers, she laid it out. The decoded partial DNA pattern of 3i Atlas is too specific to be drift. Probability modeling shows less than 0.00001% chance of convergence with Earth biology. Through randomness, logical conclusion, the signal is either constructed using a shared ancestral system or has monitored Earth life development for millions of years. Some argued that the match could be explained by nature itself. that the comet, ancient as it was, might have merely been seeded with the same cosmic dust that forms stars and planets, carbon, water, the universal chemistry of life. But if that were all, why had newly sequenced DNA been embedded into the signal timing itself? Why did a comet care about genetic material? And why had that information been transmitted not digitally, but embodied in the structure of light, physically encoded, woven inside silence and space? A breakthrough came when researchers began comparing the reconstructed patterns to newer samples from Earth, not ancient sequences, but modern human DNA. Out of a strange curiosity, a lab in Oxford input genomes from randomized anonymous donors. One of them triggered a change. An AI model designed to visualize genetic data suddenly reacted to the new input. The signal fragments from 3i ATLAS began snapping into place, segment by segment, adapting its format like a puzzle, finding the correct pieces to complete itself. The full pattern now moved like a spiral. 11 complete protein sequences formed in the simulation, unstable, hypothetical, but unlike anything that had naturally evolved on Earth. They weren't damaged versions of known genes. They were upgrades, enhanced cell repair loops. Anti-mutation regulators, built-in resistance to oxygen degradation, longevity markers, and none of it from this world. Rumors spread quickly, quietly, but dangerously. Was this comet, this silent traveler through time, holding a map to the next stage of evolution? Some called it a coincidence, others a gift, a cosmic message encoded in the language of life, a whisper across eons, not just to say hello but to show us who we once were and who we could be again. A clip began circulating in closed science forums, leaked and verified. Footage showed a lead researcher at a cryogenics and genomic lab breaking protocol, visibly shaken, pacing in front of a monitor. "She matches it," he said, pointing off camera. Someone asked what he meant. He replied, "This pattern, it's not just theoretical, it corresponds to actual subjects. This line, these genes, they've appeared before in archaeological material." Beat of silence. "You're saying it's in human history?" The man nodded slowly. "They knew us, or someone like us, long before we were known." Theories poured in. Panspermia shifted into something more advanced. Directed panspermia, not a random seeding of worlds, but a curated implantation, where life came not from accidents and collisions, but with purpose. And if the information encoded in 3i Atlas was designed to repair or enhance life, what had it seen? Who had it seen? An ancient Earth? An alternate Earth? Or a species before us? Questions turned darker. What if the purpose wasn't to seed life? What if it was to monitor it? To track progress across epochs, to compare the current model against an original design? Suddenly, the signal's structure began to resemble not just a language or a genome, but a log file. Data entries, status checks, dates. And just one, that matched Earth's orbit, precisely aligned to a planetary year. June 2nd, 20 to 5. Blind panic turned disciplined. Governments met behind closed doors. The media knew only what they were allowed to. Comet ATLAS showing high reflectivity, the headlines said. Potential for safe Earth flyby. A scientific marvel. But behind the curtain, the question was turning clinical. Were we facing a visitor? Or a repeat inspection? More sequences were matched, not just to modern DNA but to anomalies. The kind of people who would never quite fit within medical understanding. Those with rare genetic immunity to disease, or inexplicably long lives. Children born with dormant sequences that hospitals labeled junk DNA. It wasn't junk. It was waiting. In labs around the world, silent selection began. A few individuals, scattered across continents, had unique sequences that corresponded to near-perfect reconstructions from the 3i Atlas signal. No one knew yet what triggered the match, but one by one, the profiles fell into place. A man in Argentina with unparalleled neural density. A girl in rural Mongolia with a condition once thought to be neurological disorder, now seen as potential pre-adaptive evolution. twins in Morocco who could survive in extreme UV exposure without tissue damage, and finally, an unregistered child born on an icebreaker shipping vessel near Greenland, whose combined mitochondrial RNA patterns perfectly mirrored those from the decoded genome shard in the Comet. Perfect match, not 90%, not almost, perfect. They started calling it the echo signature, a genetic reflection. The press still knew nothing. Only the classified abstract from a NATO-funded meeting hinted at anything close to truth. Biosequence resonance indicates probabilistic convergence toward intentional design. Current model projects that life on Earth may either descend from or be staged as a mirror testing protocol, a test, instructions sent across time, and Earth was the lab. Suddenly, 3i, Atlas wasn't a visitor anymore. It was a mirror, and something was looking back. Whispers of stars are older than science, long before telescopes pointed skyward or satellites listened to the void. We looked up with eyes, not lenses, and made meaning from what we saw. We gave names to wandering lights, drew gods and beasts in constellations, carved stories into the fabric of the night sky, hoping one day someone or something might hear them echo back. But what if those stories weren't just stories? What if they were memories? That question began to take root first among archaeologists, not astronomers. Months after 3i ATLAS entered public consciousness, a pattern emerged, subtle, almost accidental. A group of cross-disciplinary researchers, led by Dr. Andres Calal in Cusco, Peru, were exploring indigenous star maps passed down through pre-Incan and oral tradition. One map etched onto animal skin and colored with plant dyes showed a curved path across the sky, marked with small spiral symbols and 3 diagonal lines. Beneath the arc, a small pictograph, an oval object in front of a stick figure human. The lines, when translated using modern astronomy software, correlated almost perfectly with the arc warp geometry of 3i ATLAS's current trajectory. It wasn't a made-up celestial arc. It was a hyperbolic orbit. When adjusted for axial precession, Earth's slow wobble across thousands of years, the pattern aligned with 3 historical sky events, all separated by vast stretches of time, roughly 13,000 BCE, 7,600 BCE. And for 100 BCE, the timing was impossible, except it wasn't, when the data was modeled backward, projecting the movement of 3i Atlas over hundreds of thousands of years, accounting for gravity wells, dark matter drag, and solar drift. It suggested the object had passed Earth's inner solar system 3 times before, once every few thousand years, each time during a major shift in human civilization. The Sumerians spoke of a bright messenger that came with fire and sky sound before rain returned to the deserts. The Mayans referenced a mirror, star that sees all things, an eye in the sky, cold and eternal, arriving in their long count calendar not as an omen, but a correction, a check-in. Even older Aboriginal Dreamtime legends from northern Australia described the travelling ice, a silver whale that swims through the stars, circling the Earth every many lifetimes to leave behind songs for the people still listening. In Sri Lanka, stone tablets showed pictograms of a 3-pointed light descending over a mountain, dated to more than 3,000 years ago. Across the globe, cultures separated by oceans told stories of an object that arrived, lingered, and disappeared. It offered no words, only dreams, only a sense of being seen. Perhaps it wasn't mythology at all. Perhaps humanity had already seen 3i Atlas. And perhaps, each time, we didn't know what we were seeing but still felt it. The age of the object, the repetitions of its orbit, the intervals matching not just random appearance but mapped alignments with solar maximums, geomagnetic shifts, even mass animal migrations. Every time something on Earth had changed, and every time we had found a way to remember. In stories etched in stone, carvings, fire dances, caves. These weren't tribal tales, they were messages, passed between generations who knew they would not be believed, but had to try. The human instinct for memory, for myth, for truth hidden in metaphor. And now, thousands of years later, Science was decoding the same truths the ancients had already mapped. In one of the most remote regions of Namibia, near the ancient Sodilo Hills, places known by local cultures as the Mountains of the Gods, a newly uncovered cave system revealed earth pigments aged over 10,000 years. On one wall, high above reach, was engraved a symbol with curious precision, 3 vertical dots in a triangle, and beneath them, a single curved line, identical to the one seen in the signal from 3i Atlas. Not similar exact, the vibrational language, the echo field, the spiral genome, the mirrored pattern. Everything pointed to one chilling possibility. The message wasn't new. It was old. So all that Earth had already received it again and had left marks of its coming. Like tree rings in time. Why now? Why reveal its signal again? Why wake when we finally had the tools to analyze and listen? Perhaps we had reached a threshold, a genetic one, a technological one, a spiritual one. Perhaps these visits were checkpoints, intervals in a grand experiment. There was no voice, no entity, no visible pilot aboard the object. And yet, the impact on minds, myths, and memory pointed toward something active, deliberately quiet. What kind of intelligence guides something for 760 million years, without ever needing to say a word? What kind of being lives in signals, in mirrors, in echoes? Someone in the UN Special Task Working Group finally asked aloud, what everyone else feared to whisper. What if this object doesn't just contain information? What if it's the one evaluating ours? Within the Vatican Secret Archive, digital archivists found something unnerving. An uncatalogued scroll, never published. Translated from a now-lost Gnostic sect in 300 CE, the scroll described a silent visitor. Cold star, unmelting, neither flame nor beast, written in the purest mirror. Watching the garden of dust and breath, it ends with a single unsettling phrase, scrawled in the corner like a warning, or perhaps a promise. When it blinks, the world forgets. When it gazes, we remember who we were. Historians set to work retranslating the scroll not for theology, but for data. Repetitions of eye-shaped designs, star paths and ancient interpretation of genome-like diagrams poured out of the document under spectral analysis. Nothing was coincidence. Not the orbit. Not the signal. Not the stories. Not even us. And if 3i Atlas had come before, it would likely come again. The only question now was, what did we do last time? And what, precisely, were we about to remember? All that time, Earth had been watching it from afar. Mapping it, modeling it, decoding light pulses and radio silence. But the surface? It remained the same black, polished, reflective, impossibly smooth. It had no tail, no craters, no irregularity. It didn't behave like a comet, or a ship, or even a construct. It gave back nothing but the exact energy it received, and yet it was there, real, moving, reacting, still hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, still silent, until the probe drew close. It was an improvised mission, a last-minute modification to Enceladus Pathfinder 4, a repurposed outer solar probe just barely on a viable intersect. Within 32 hours, it snapped its first images of 3i Atlas up close. One photo, then another. Then a freeze in the transmission. It wasn't an error. The probe paused the feed by its own protocol. Something inside the onboard AI imaging system triggered a breach flag. Unclassified geometry detected. A human operator, somewhere deep underground at the Geneva ESA telemetry station, manually resumed the feed after override. What they saw wasn't what they expected. No icy cliffs, no dust plumes. The object's surface was not stone or ice or porous mineral. It was grey-black metallic, but not dulled by age, not eroded or scorched or pitted from billions of years. In fact, it looked pristine. Flawless. As if it hadn't simply survived time and space, but ignored them. The drones sent a scan. LiDAR, radar, radiographic mapping, thermal spectrometry. Nothing bounced back the way it should. No consistent density, no mineral echo signatures. The surface rippled the incoming signals not as reflection but as absorption. A slow bending of data, a funnel. Shockingly smooth resonance curves at all frequencies. It wasn't just metal. It was adaptive. The objects should have been inert, but nearly every scan returned hints of internal reaction microvibrations. Spirals in resonance not created by the probe, but mirrored back to it, like sonar bouncing off something that knew it was being observed. Somewhere inside that shape, something had moved. Not much, just enough to create a ripple, a murmur, safely orbiting at a distance of 12,000 kilometers. The Pathfinder for probe initiated low-frequency impulse testing, standard protocol, not to trigger but to test feedback. The object responded, not immediately, but within 33 minutes, it returned something unexpected. It emitted a matching frequency, precisely inverted. Humans had sent thousands of probes across the stars. We knew the difference between reflection and response. This was deliberate. Something had caught the signal, processed it, reversed it, and sent it back perfectly. And it hadn't just echoed it, it had passed it through a pattern. The inverted wave showed encoding, geometry embedded within the signal, not random noise, grids, spirals, more interference not caused by error, but design, a message layered inside a message, or perhaps something woven into its body, like an instrument tuned to the voice of the cosmos itself. But then came the anomaly that no one could explain. Radiographic mapping had produced a rough 3D density model. Each pass refined it, cutting away false values and static. And finally, at the center of the dark machine, something impossible. 7 equidistant chambers, exact symmetry, geometric voids perfectly calibrated to Fibonacci spirals, hollow but non-collapsing. No gravity structures, no fuel housing, and at the very center, a pressure signature resembling compression wave containment. Something was being held inside. Held still, held silent, a containment field, or a cocoon. Across the ocean at NASA's Langley Research Center. An interdisciplinary meeting was held behind blackout doors. Neuroscientists, quantum theorists, and linguists were called in, not to speak, but to listen. To playback. The resonance response captured by the probe, now cleaned, slowed, and translated into the auditory spectrum, was played through deep sonic monitors. It was not speech, not music. It was motion across dimensional frequency. Some in the room heard rhythm, others a hum like heavy water. One woman left the room crying. When questioned later, she couldn't explain why, only that she felt like something had recognized her and let her go. Another described the sound as what it must feel like to remember being born. Back at ESA Geneva, the density map continued to update as pass after pass refined the scan. It got clearer. The object's internal structure, once thought inert, now hinted at the presence of membranes, thin threads of something between bio and artificial, like neural tissue rendered in polished silicon. One researcher wrote and deleted a note later found in the backup logs of the workstation. This isn't a ship. It's a body. What were once thought to be reflective carvings on the object's skin now appeared to change subtly depending on angle of incidence, optical illusions that behaved like fluid lenses, mirroring their observer. Someone likened it to a one-way mirror, except one side wasn't glass. It was thought the object's shape and density changed slightly between scans, just beyond instrument error margins. At first, this was chalked up to signal compression, but then it was confirmed. The object was reconfiguring itself, slowly, thoughtfully. Unfolding. From what? Into what? No one knew. But one fragment inside the return signal began repeating itself in different wavelengths, encoded where no one thought to look, in thermal drift, in ultrasonic gaps, even in photon interference from nearby stars, a single recurring motif. 3 dots, a curve. The same symbol, again. And again, embedded, layered, stretched, repeated. Not for our eyes now, but perhaps for our ancestors then. And if all the scans were right, if the chambers inside were waiting, if the membranes were realigning, if what we were seeing wasn't rock or ship or wreckage, then Earth had not received a visitor. No. It had received a sleeper. Not dead. Not machine. But something else. Something. Alive. And waking. It began with ATIMESTAMP. Or at least, what they thought was one. Buried deep in a resonance loop extracted from the inverted signal was a numerical pattern. Difficult to notice. At first glance, just noise inside the pulse gaps. But when one data scientist, an astrometric pattern analyst from Kyoto, rearranged the sequence according to solar time intervals rather than atomic ticks, something happened. The sequence began counting. Not up, not down, but towards something. Each unit represented Earth days, years, coordinates, matched and overlaid on Earth-based star charts. The sequence corresponded with exact orbital positions, planets, moons, and even eclipses, and there it was, June 2nd, 2025. Then, again, March 13th, 2046, August 20th, 2093, April 1st to 190. No mistake, the signal wasn't pointing to the past. It was nominative, REFERENTIAL. These were dates, or targets, and that was just the beginning. Dr. Hannah Liu, now surrounded by a permanent global task force, reviewed what others initially thought were inert data sets, leftover residue from the first decoded genomes, but embedded between genomic sequences were long strands of number combinations out of order from any chemical code until they were aligned against planetary EPHEMERIDES. Suddenly, the mismatched numbers weren't strange at all. They described the orbital alignment of the inner planets Earth, Mars, Venus, Mercury, each locked into position at specific moments over the next 100 years. Every 21 to 28 years, a moment occurred when those alignments matched exact angular coordinates to within fractions of a degree. At each alignment, a date, June 2nd, 2025, just a few days away. Those alignments weren't random. They were markers, messages sent not across distance, but across time. In a secure bunker beneath CERN, ultra-deep data models were being tested using quantum probability fields. One function attempted to simulate retrocausal messaging cause influencing effect across temporal boundaries, at least on the quantum level. No system had ever produced meaningful results. Until now, when the pulse pattern of 3I Atlas was used as the carrier, something unprecedented occurred. The quantum network returned a message, but not from the past, from its own future state, several milliseconds in advance, impossibly slight, but real. It was like the system already knew what it was about to receive. The cleaner the signal became, the stronger the effect grew. It was as though 3I Atlas wasn't just emitting data, it was processing feedback. Before Earth had even sent it, over time, it became harder to deny the comet was observing time differently, or experiencing it differently, or perhaps more frighteningly, it wasn't experiencing time at all. Not linearly, not like us. To it, the alignment of planets, the orbit of the stars, the evolution of species, all of it was a still frame, a fixed constellation of possibility it could rotate through on demand. Its signal may already know what humanity would choose, what mistakes we would make, what doors we would open. It wasn't delivering prophecy. It was handing us a script. We just didn't know whether it was one we were meant to follow, or one we were being warned away from. Military advisors called for preparation. Governments denied everything as they always do and demanded silence. But the urgency was rising. Scientists weren't just studying 3I Atlas anymore. They were witnessing it change. Object scans revealed new heating patterns, tiny surges deep in its core. Internal chambers previously cold were now off the measurable thermal scale. A slow glow had begun emanating from its underbelly, invisible to the naked eye, but strong in the infrared band. Worse, its velocity was adjusting. Until now, it had coasted on a passive curve, but now the curve was changing, tightening. As if preparing for insertion, not a flyby. An approach. Some believed it was still passive, waiting, responding, mirroring intent, but others wondered, what if this object wasn't reacting to humanity's detection? What if it had always known? What if its orbit had been set from the beginning, stable across centuries, until our response changed everything? Until we awoke it? Could our curiosity have triggered the next behavior? Did we give permission without knowing? A small AI parsing program, deployed independently from any government body, began decoding a unique new rhythm in the pulse response. A minor glitch in its logging routine led it to duplicate certain waveform profiles at identical time-stamp positions, and, in reviewing the phase echo something impossible emerged. The signal began to anticipate input. Duplicate test signals, if sent twice a day at the same hour, would be met not with the same reply, but with the next phase of transmission, as if 3i, Atlas remembered adapted learned, and not simply from what it received but from a timeline already known. The phrase temporal resonance began appearing in academic briefs. Papers were classified, experiments halted, access was revoked, and still, the data kept unfolding. On the evening of May 29th, an unexpected report arrived from India. Amateur astronomers at a dark sky site in the Ladakh region reported something impossible. 3i, Atlas had blinked. Multiple. Observers watched it disappear from the sky just for half a second and return, not due to atmospheric interference, not a shutter error. It had vanished. Telemetry confirmed the object signal had punctuated a hard drop in return signal and light for exactly 0.52 seconds. Blink. Gone. Then back. What had once taken millions of years to reach us had, in less than a second, acted outside linear time. If the comet was aware of the future, then to it, we were already in memory. Perhaps Earth was already catalogued. Perhaps the outcome had already been written. And maybe this wasn't contact, but closure. One last detail emerged. Inside the pulse response, hidden in the harmonics of the inverted signal, a frame of data surfaced that, unlike the genetic markers or orbital timestamps, was completely alien. None of the numerology matched any Earth-based calendar, but the three-dimensional render of the data points showed a shape that turned slowly on its own axis, spiraling toward a center point at fixed intervals. The model eerily resembled an event countdown, and at its center, a zero-dash point. Timed. Not to planetary destruction, not to arrival, but to activation. Everything settled around a moment not far away, just days from now. In Earth relative time, June 2nd, 2025, the world hadn't received a warning from a comet. It had received a scheduled event, planned, orchestrated. Expected. And 3i, Atlas wasn't just part of that plan. It was the plan. Now the only question that mattered was no longer when it had come, but whether it had ever truly left. They called it resonance. Not in the technical sense, not frequencies or wavelengths. It was something else, something quieter, biological, personal. It started with anomalies, small ones. A man in Sweden began hearing low pulses in his sleep. Not tinnitus, something deeper, rhythmic. It woke with him. It matched nothing nearby but corresponded with recorded signal pings received from 3i, Atlas. Doctors thought it was auditory hallucination. Stress. Then came the blood work. Elevated iron, cellular repair markers off the charts. Abnormal mitochondrial replication, smoother, faster, almost optimized. He hadn't changed, exactly, but something inside him had been tuned. When geneticists ran a quick scan, they found nearly 11% of his non-coding genetic material mapped onto signal structures decrypted months earlier. Not a coincidence, a match. He wasn't infected. He wasn't sick. He had been recognized. Around the world, more reports trickled in. A child in Botswana became obsessed with drawing fractals. Another in New Mexico began speaking in unknown syllables during sleep, repeating the same pattern every night, never remembering it. But when recorded and analyzed, the syllables disconnected and era-matched compressions inside the signal's frequency spectrum. An artist in Paris painted a strange, spiral-eyed figure with 3 dots on its forehead nearly a week before scientists publicly acknowledged the symbol pulled from thermal mapping. None of these people knew each other, and yet they were all connected not by culture or location, but by their genetics, the echo signature, first theorized, then confirmed. Each exhibiting sleep disturbances, improved reflexes, vivid dreams about motion and stillness, about oceans on fire and cities of light beneath black skies, and above all, the sense of being watched with love and measured with weight as if something both ancient and vast was looking in, not to judge, but to check its work. To see if we had grown right. It was never just a comet. It was a signal. And the signal had chosen interpreters. Dr. Cameron Osei, now leading the Joint Neurotemporal Task Force, described the experience as genetic activation. 3i. Atlas wasn't just broadcasting data, it was sending, in encoded resonance, pattern suggestions, almost like genetic downloads, unlocking instructions dormant within us, blueprints we had always carried. Cells began to express differently, not dangerously, not publicly. Quiet subtleties, improved tactile perception, increased dream recall, accelerated recovery from minor injuries, a vague sense of displacement as if memories had begun drifting sideways across timelines. Something was synchronizing. But with what? At 3:10 GMT, 3 days before June 2nd, the Voyager 3 Deep Eco Probe, a listening satellite parked far beyond Neptune's orbit, picked up an unscheduled frequency burst coordinated with Earth's rotation, aimed directly at near-Earth space. It wasn't directed at 3i, Atlas. It was aimed at Earth, a tight beam communication, one that almost wasn't meant to be heard at all. Its pattern was familiar genetic again, but this time it wasn't instructional. It was repeatable, responsive, as though the probe had encountered a reply coming from Earth itself. In a study in Iceland, a pair of identical twins, one a researcher, the other a field biologist, both began to exhibit a neurological phenomena previously only seen in stroke recovery therapies. Shared motor phasing, sensed REM patterns, matched language construction in isolation. Their minds weren't merging but sensing. They were starting to broadcast. Not thoughts, not speech, but signal patterns, when recorded and overlaid with data from the comet's own resonance field. The tones matched up. Earth had begun to respond. The twins' shared dreams contained imagery only confirmed later from AI renders of the comet's core. 7 chambers, a central ember, spiral lattice above a black sea. When asked how they knew, neither could explain, only that it felt inevitable, a return, like an alarm clock built into something older than humanity. Finally going off, not everyone responded the same. Some felt nothing. Others, those carrying fragments of the genetic match, began to cluster into recognition patterns. Their body language changed. Their heart rate cinched with solar winds. They started dreaming of places they'd never been, in languages never spoken aloud, all centered around a single oncoming moment in time. June to ND. In every simulation, every AI prediction system modeling the encoded countdown shuttered after that date. No known simulations could project beyond it. It was as if the future had paused. Not for destruction, but for correction, and the comet, finally within range to be seen unaided in the night sky, did something no object had ever done before. It stopped. Its velocity adjusted with precision beyond any known natural mechanism. It hovered for 17 minutes, subquantum stable relative to Earth's own magnetic field. Then, for the first time, it moved toward Earth. Slowly. Deliberately. As if drawn to something here. Or someone independent. Quantum data groups began looking again at the resonance data and found something buried in the pairs of inverted timelines. A question. It wasn't written out. It had no actual language, but it repeated throughout the pulse structure in every frequency. Right beneath perception. An invitation. A simple prompt. Are you ready to continue? And now the world had to ask itself, were we? Were we meant to discover this? Or had we finally just caught up to where the message had always been waiting? Maybe the object hadn't come for Earth. Maybe it hadn't come at all. Maybe We had come into phase with it. And now everything was listening. Everything was aligned. And soon something would respond. It arrived without sound. No boom, no flash, no wave of heat tearing through the atmosphere. Just a presence, a shape slowly coasting into Earth's orbital shadow, passing silently between the planet and the sun, brighter than a moon, colder than ice, more still than the stars it passed. The night it came closest. The world didn't panic. It did the opposite. A strange calm swept across continents. Traffic stopped. Phones fell silent. Hospitals noted a drop in emergency calls. Military satellites recorded fewer aircraft. Animal migration froze mid-pattern in parts of the southern hemisphere. Even the ocean tides stilled minutely for 13 seconds longer than expected. It was as if the entire planet held its breath. In every culture, there was a name for this kind of silence. The quiet before a storm. A sacred hush before revelation. Priests, physicists, children all looked up and understood the same thing without saying it. This was not the end. This was the pause before everything would become clear. Over the Pacific, Earth's largest shadow spread with unusual intensity. That night, a new moon coincided with total planetary alignment. Venus, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter all falling into harmonic sequence. Predicted, simulated, and watched by hundreds of telescopes. At 9:42 UTC, 3I, Atlas passed directly between Earth and the Sun and vanished behind the solar disk. It should have emerged again minutes later, but it didn't. For 6 full minutes, there was nothing. Satellites failed to relocate the object behind the coronal arc. Optical systems began returning static. And then the sky itself began to change. In every part of the world where the sun should have risen, people reported a strange phenomenon. The light dimmed a fraction too much, like a lens had been laid over the atmosphere. The colors of dawn dulled. Green became slate. Blue turned violet. Sharp edges blurred. Photons arrived late. No instrument could explain it, but it was like space itself had bent, like the laws had softened, just slightly. A field, somewhere near the edge of the Indian Ocean, on a cargo ship drifting in low seas. A group of crewmen stood at the railing and looked skyward as the light dimmed above them. The wind fell still. The birds that followed their ship veered off suddenly, mid-flight, circling something that wasn't there. The clouds above twisted into radial symmetry without wind to push them. Then, with no warning, the crew saw it above the water. In the distance, a flicker. Not in the sky, but in the world. A kind of ripple, the way hot air bends vision, or sound pulses in a dense fog. A shimmer, quick and soft, as though reality had blinked. Elsewhere, others saw it too. A woman in Argentina looked up from her garden and saw her shadow split for a moment. 2 shadows, side by side, attached to the same body. In Tokyo, a child pointed at the sky and asked his mother why the clouds were breathing. In Norway, someone standing on a frozen shore recorded the blue aurora above them folding in on itself, then fading clean as though erased, stretched back across the sky. Every moment was brief, measured, but undeniable. Something was happening to the planet, not physically, not violently, but structurally. As if Earth had crossed into something unseen. Or perhaps as if something had reached a hand into us. At 9:48 UTC, 6 minutes late, 3I, Atlas flashed back into visual range, reappearing at an unexpected angle. Now trailing particles, but they weren't ice, not rock, not debris. What followed was light, soft, organic curls of illumination, each strand drifting like bioluminescent spores. In orbit around the silent object, the comet, the construct, the seed, the sleeper had opened. From within its shell, a single structure extended, not a weapon, not an antenna. A spiral lattice, golden in composition, glowing in a spectrum not fully visible to human eyes. Each pulse from it matched previously recorded Earth-M fluctuations. A perfect harmony. It wasn't sending now. It was listening. And Earth was finally speaking. Across the world, those carrying eco-signatures began to feel it, physically. Their skin grew warm. Their pulse matched a 1.6 Hz rhythm. completely in sync with the signal now embedded in Earth's upper atmosphere. Some began to speak languages they had never learned. Others hummed. Many simply sat down wherever they were, as if obeying a forgotten instinct. And despite the chaos all this could have caused, it didn't. No riots, no screams, just silence, a collective murmuring of recognition. One neurologist, stunned by local field patients entering simultaneous REM sleep in broad daylight, described the onset as a lucid dream injected into the waking world, and inside that dream, 3 dots dot a curve, a spiral opening like an eye, and a voice not heard, but felt. There you are, at mission control locations around the world. Remaining radar and telemetry systems weren't offline but misaligned. The comet's mass was no longer reading properly. Its gravitational field had expanded, geometrically in a way no mass ever should. It didn't grow larger but more present, as if space around it became denser, as if the field of reality near Earth had begun folding, not closing, opening. Inward, like a tunnel or a memory. The structure was dimensional, not spatial, not made to be seen but entered, a platform, a receiver. A place where consciousness could touch content. Then, a final message returned in the pulse channel. No visible symbols, no language, just harmonic truths that many would claim later they understood perfectly, even though they couldn't explain it. Just this: we came before, we come again, not to land, but to wait. Not to rule, but to ask. Not to warn, but to see how you've grown. And at 9:53 UTC, every screen on Earth blinked. Just once, for less than a second. Global power dipped. Even offline equipment, ink on pages, paint on canvas, visions in meditation, all pulsed with a tremor of atomic coherence. Earth had entered alignment, not between planets, but between intent and invitation. And for 1 full minute, every echo-bearer, every dreamer, every child who looked up and saw something without being told what it was, finally remembered. They weren't waiting to make contact. They were waiting to wake up. It should have ended there. The alignment came. The signal pulsed. The sky bent. And for a while, Earth sat in the hush that follows all great questions, the kind of stillness the human soul recognizes before it even knows what it's waiting for. And then, 3i, Atlas left. Or so it seemed. The object, once central in the heavens and at the core of every global observatory's sensors, began to move again, subtly at first, then steadily shifting toward its outbound path. Just as predicted, the spiral lattice withdrew. The bioluminescent halo around it faded, and within days, it was gone from the sky. Just another invisible traveler returning to the deep. Most thought that was the end. It wasn't, because 3 hours after the object vanished beyond the sun's glare, a new signal was detected, not from space, but from Earth specifically. Beneath it, deep below the Atlantic Ocean, along a fault line no human machine had thoroughly mapped, came a resonance ping that mirrored 3i ATLAS's last transmission exactly. Not a reflection, a perfect echo, but reversed, inverted phase, mirror timing, same amplitude. As if two parts of one conversation had finally been brought into alignment, as if the second message had always been there, waiting for a reply. Submarine drones were quickly deployed, dispatched under the cover of NOAA's deep-sea mapping operations. What they found wasn't a structure. Not yet. What they found was a change. A column of superheated water, rising slowly despite the absence of volcanic activity. A current, not a burst, a pulse. Water didn't do that on its own. A geothermal scan showed something buried within the seabed's mantless smooth outline, like a capsule or an organ encased in hardened crust. It was not metal. Not mineral, but a substance unknown to any material sample recorded on Earth's geological timeline, and it was vibrating. In harmony with the frequency 3i Atlas had left behind. Scientists called it a coincidence. An echo, after all. The planet is alive. It hums. It groans. Plate tectonics and oceanic currents twist into patterns far beyond easy prediction. But those with echo signatures felt it too. many of them uncoordinated. Unspeaking stood still across the globe at the exact moment the undersea pulse began. They didn't know why. They just felt that something. Arrived not from space but from within in Iceland. A woman dreamed of a stairwell beneath the ocean that ended in stars in Australia. An elder who hadn't spoken in 3 years suddenly rose, pointed to the horizon and said, "They are not gone. They have joined." In Kenya, a shepherd looked up and said to no one, "It is not their gift. It is ours returning." And in Greenland, the child born at sea that unregistered, girl whose DNA echoed the signal perfectly began to draw spiral patterns on the ice. Silent, unblinking, as if remembering an instruction. No one had taught her the symbol, but she drew it anyway, over and over. Until in the final drawing, 3 dots hovered above the spiral, and 1 below. Earth was not left with wreckage. No ruins, no landings, no monuments. What remained was within. Changes so quiet, so deep, that they didn't shift systems or break headlines. They shifted presence, somewhere underground, somewhere sub-oceanic, buried like a sleeper cell in DNA, in time, in waiting. Not a device, a seed, left before, called now. And if 3i, Atlas passed through space for 760 million years, perhaps its other half passed through us. Slowly, invisibly, waiting for the right signal, waiting for Earth to become itself. To remember. To respond. To be ready. There is no conclusion. Not really. The object has gone, the comet's light has faded, but the planet has changed. Not in shape, not in rule, but in memory. The oceans still ripple with something beneath. The land breathes with something new. And above us, beyond light years, something once cold and quiet continues to drift, its task complete. There are no more messages, no more pulses, just a feeling now that we are not alone, and that perhaps we never were. That perhaps this wasn't contact, but continuation. An ancient story, quietly resuming its next chapter, one spiral at a time. As above, so below.